Big, fast change is an everyday reality in the new age of AI. To meet the opportunities and challenges of the AI-powered economy, data centers will need to think differently about scale, power, and the supply chain. Our guest today on Data Center Richness is an ideal guide in this important transition. Crosby is the founder and CEO of Compass Datacenters, which builds some of the largest hyperscale data center campuses. Chris shares how Compass has embraced new approaches to power and the supply chain, as well as sustainable construction and backup power. But for Crosby, it all comes down to company culture and building great teams, as well as great products that are built to last. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. Let's get started. Welcome to Data Center Richness. I'm Rich Miller, and I've spent 25 years telling the story of data centers, cloud computing, and AI infrastructure. In this podcast, I'm sharing conversations with the innovators building our digital future. Now, here's our show. Chris Crosby, welcome to Data Center Richness.
Thank you, Rich. Great to be here.
I've been looking forward to speaking with you because you're someone who's been working in the industry for a long time, seen a lot of things, and including a lot of change. Been through some business cycles, just sort of driven a lot of change yourself. We're at an interesting time in the industry, sort of an interesting moment, where there's an enormous amount of opportunity, but also quite a few challenges. So I wanted to start with sort of the place of digital infrastructure in an AI-powered world. Where are we at, and where do you think we're going?
It's really amazing. You mentioned the journey. I started my career on the real estate side and with bankruptcies of telecom companies and .com companies back in the early 2000s. So to look at the journey over these last 25 years, it's pretty phenomenal. And when you look at the last couple in particular, with data and AI just becoming prevalent as the engines of the economies, it's really another industrial revolution, right? It's a brand new thing that's going to change the way that we all live our lives every single day. I can't imagine the opportunity to be in this, and at the infrastructure side of it, it's very humbling in terms of the scale and what's necessary to get to from capital and scale perspective of what needs to happen. But it's also so exciting as the world changes so quickly.
One of the things we've seen is, you mentioned scale. As the sort of excitement around AI has built, and we've seen the largest companies really focus on building up their AI capabilities. The data centers are the engines of all of the AI technology. So we've seen a request for enormous campuses. It's sort of almost like Spinal Tap, where everything's getting turned up to 11. But that creates some challenges on the power side, as we've seen. There are a number of the leading markets that data centers operate in that are power constrained right now. And so as an industry, and really as sort of an economy, we're grappling with how to match the power needs of the internet and AI that moves very fast, and the power grid and utility industry that historically has moved at a different speed. I know you've thought a lot about this. How are you thinking about how we make power demand work for all of this AI capacity?
It's really interesting, Rich. When you look at what we need, we really need that power. There's ample generation and things in terms of the country, but for four different times throughout a year, right? So there's hours, dozens of hours per year that really come into this peak scenario. And we solve for things in the data center world with a little bit of a brute force instrument, and that we talk about the peak design day at 100% load. Every plug is turned on, every loading dock is opening. That's what we design for in terms of the buildings, and that's not necessarily the most realistic load profile. And so, one of the things that's important to recognize is that our challenges in power are really limited to number of hours, a defined number of hours every year. Um, but there's still more generation that needs to come as well. So it's kind of I think the 0 or 1 game that we play of availability is an interesting challenge that we have. If you noticed, as what we've done in the ERCOT grid, with Pablo and his team, they got passed a bill that allowed the data centers, to come off of and utilize their generation. Um, we've been a big proponent of this type of approach. We've actually been talking about it for a couple of years now within the utility community, and I really believe that with data centers being such a core part of the infrastructure of all of the economies, it's effectively the new electricity, and as a result of that, when we at Compass, the way that we think about things is we're trying to really think about things on a lasting basis. And how do you build to last, and have 100+ year campus type of environment? And if you do that, you're going to work alongside the utility companies much more closely to try to help them to and get it more in a co-serve environment instead of a will serve or must serve environment. And I think that that's really critical for us as an industry. I think we have a societal obligation along those lines, because we can actually, as private money, help to grow and improve the infrastructure in the United States and Canada and whatever countries that we're operating within. Um, but that's not always the way that people take things, and so how we go about doing that as an industry requires it requires tighter relationships with the utilities, but it also requires some regulatory changes. There are some things that need to happen in order for data centers to be utilized. If I look at the state of Texas and the storm Uri that had all those outages, right, and a lot of people were impacted, data centers could have been the solution, but there was not an ability. It was be against the law in order for those data centers to operate. You have to wait till the power got cut as opposed to plan to take those data centers off the grid during that difficult time. And so it's a really fascinating combination of the business world, the data center developer and operator world, the utility company world, and the regulatory world. And I don't think there's enough people talking about the regulatory limitations that are very real, that are not really. They're good for society. It's good for people, but it's actually regulated in a way that's too tight, and it doesn't allow good things to happen. So there's work that has to be done on those fronts.
We've been talking a lot on the podcast recently about power, about the potential for flexibility to uh, make more capacity available and increase the time to power for data center companies. And there seems to be a few different, obstacles. On the regulation front, uh, utilities are complicated. There's a lot of different sort of layers and in state, local, federal, and regions, ISOs. When I started to dive into it's more complicated than you think at first, and that is true of the policy and regulatory frameworks as well. It seems to me. How do we go about sort of trying to bring the change that enables both the data center industry and some of the other industries that are going to see more load growth to accomplish what they need?
Well, I think the big change is that you're a collaborator instead of just a customer. And so we've been working for some time now with EPRI, and working with that team. We've been participants with the EEI, Edison Electric Institute, which is the big consortium of all the utilities. And you've got to come up with solutions that work for both parties and both groups. And we have to speak with a voice that takes into account the concerns, right? There's valid concerns out there. One of the concepts that, for example, today, if we were to go into a market, and let's say there's network congestion somewhere in that market, or underserved areas, for example, that may need investment. We'd really love to bring the concept of proffering into the world of the utilities, where proffering in real estate is very common, where as a real estate developer, if I want to build a complex and we need a bridge in order to get improved, we need a bridge improved in order to handle that traffic that's going to come, you would pay for that off of your site in order to get your zoning approval and your entitlement. Well, we believe that the utility side could use the same thing. Of course, today the regulations don't let that happen. But what if in conjunction with us getting half a gigawatt or a gigawatt worth of power, we made an investment somewhere where they can't justify it based upon a highly regulated environment with specific returns and things like that they'll never justify for to unclog a congestion area or to serve an underserved community. We'd love to have the ability to do that in exchange for having access to the power. So those types of concepts require a lot of regulatory change. The other thing that happens too is when we think about the generation that's on site, is we run into emissions issues, and sometimes these emission issues are so strict, they really don't make logical sense. I mean, for example, the EPA today treats HVO the same as diesel, and we all know that it's not. I mean, it's a circular fuel. It's a good fuel. It's clean burning. It does reduces down the NOx. It does all of those things. But right now we have a regulatory environment that says, well, because you could run a different type of fuel in those engines, we're going to take the worst case scenario, and that's tough. I mean, those are things that aren't in the best interest of people. Why would you pay more for HVO like we do? You're not going to encourage many people to pay more. We're doing it to be a good neighbor, but you're not going to get many people to do that. And we've just got to get some, it's uncommon sense, I guess, around some of these things. Not all things are bad. We really think the protection of the ratepayer, the poor, those types of environments, like that should be sacrosanct. We are making investments in these areas, and we do need to be good neighbors and good community servants.
Well, that's uh, interesting to discuss because obviously the data center industry and the folks who really want to see AI move ahead rapidly are willing to put capital into this. Uh, and it's not unprecedented, of course, for data centers to help fund substations, but it sounds like one of the things you're talking about that has been a real time and congestion barrier is transmission. And that tends to be very complicated because it might involve different territories. Um, I know over in Ireland, they've just started to look at, what they call the private wires initiative of letting some data center operators, uh, fund or help build transmission, particularly to renewable energy projects. What are the barriers here to that? Is it just the regulatory? Is it the public resistance to transmission in general? What are the things we got to work through there?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. One is you've got to get creative. One of our projects, we bought 7 parcels of land so that we could provide easements for the transmission to the utility, and we just bought the land for the very purposes of doing transmission. So we cobbled it together on our side. It was easier than running through the easement process, as a for example. So there's some creativity side of things, some investment side of things that you can do. But they're also, the timeframes are lengthy. I mean, you can be 3 years of public opinion, and things. And look, while I don't think all data center, I think there's a lot of build to exit data center operators that may make some bad decisions. I think there's a lot more build to last data center providers that are looking to make good community investment. And if we could delineate between those two, I think it'd be helpful, right? In terms of, you're trying to be part of things on the long run. And I think that build to last type of environment is going to make those decisions in a way that's going to help things out on a better basis. And when we get into that environment, what do we need to have change? Well, is it really realistic to have a 3-year review process for a new transmission line that's going to uncongest? It's going to eliminate losses, which is carbon going straight into the air because we're transmitting at lower voltages, and we're going to get access to other elements. If we can be part of that re-networking, making investment in underserved areas, doing those sorts of things, and be viewed as a positive, And I think you saw the article that recently came out from PGE about that the price has actually gone down in their experience for the consumers as data centers have come in, and we've been big drivers for the renewables. So I think we're at the tip of the spear of utilizing the data center environments to help re-network and redo the grid. But we need that help from a regulatory environment to recognize that that's why we're doing it. And I do acknowledge, though, there are some of those build to exit approaches. Those are that's what gives us the black eye as far as an industry, right?
It seems to be a huge problem because there's a lot of folks getting into utility queues for potentially large amounts of power that both slow the utility down in their ability to consider the projects that are going to get forward and have the clients and the funding lined up. And then at the same time, we see these the utilities, because of the way that things happen, have to disclose these gargantuan amounts of demand requests that they've got. The media picks up on that, and we get the data centers are eating the grid kind of stories. Uh, it seems like on the one hand, there's some process questions there for utilities and whether they can think differently, because this is a huge headache for them, not just the data centers who are waiting for power. It's making all kinds of work for them to review all of these requests. But then it gets into how do you determine, if you've got three or four players who are all competing for the same requirement and they all need to like be able to assert that they've got the power. Have you heard anything from the utilities or have some thoughts about how that particular situation can be addressed?
Yeah, look, they've got a tough situation, right? They can't put their thumb on the scale. Every request is treated equally, and I don't think that's fair necessarily at these levels. And that's a crazy concept coming from an entrepreneur, right? The last thing you want to do is create barriers for new businesses and barriers for new folks. The challenge is that the model just doesn't have it needs to be enhanced, right? It needs to be enhanced. It's one thing to come to the table, with 25, $100 million in this world. And it's quite another to come with billions and billions of dollars in this world. And there's differences between those two, right? In terms of what's coming to the table. So, while I don't ever want to regulate folks out of opportunity, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of immaturity in terms of what's getting locked up. And, oh, we've got 500 meg, we've got a gigawatt worth of capacity, and you've never delivered anything. That's a different scenario, and it makes it really tough on the utilities. I talked to a lot of the CEOs, and even if you look at the load profiles, and this is one of the things I've asked our own industry to work on, is the load profiles don't look like that. They're not a super stable, use it all the time type of load. It has during the day types of variations, during season type of variations. Um, Capacity equals inventory for them, so that they can sell to someone. So you don't ever want to be running at 100% because then you've run out of inventory for your business model. So I think we need to get more sophisticated in terms of the loads and how we deal with that. But I think the way that can happen is we can start treating peak different than normal, and start being more intelligent in terms of how we communicate. And we spend a lot of time around what load profiles actually look like, and how long it actually takes to get to them. We as an industry haven't done ourselves a service where we say we need 500 megawatts day one, and we don't use 500 megawatts for 4 years. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, with Compass, you've been involved with DC Flex. You mentioned Edison Electric. It seems like the conversations and collaboration around this are improving about, flexibility and those, peak grid hours that are the real problem that can be solved for. One of my questions is what that looks like on the data center side of things, uh, particularly in terms of everybody thinking they're workload is precious, but as you mentioned, they can be very different. Well, on the data center side of things, what are the steps needed to try and make flexibility work? And maybe to make, I don't know if customer comfort is another challenge here. What do you see as the opportunities, the sort of tools and levers that we can tweak there?
so look, I think the key. I think there's two keys. I think I think the first key is that we've got to deal with a situation in which, um, sometimes we have the ability to come off the grid, and we can also supply to the grid with the power plants that we have on our sites, right? So it is a power plant, and it could be utilized. So there's some regulatory things that have to change, like what happened with SB6 in Texas, where in a non-emergent, maybe there is a planned emergency or something like that. We know something's coming. We can ask people to go off. And so you have to build resilient infrastructure that can allow for that to occur for however many hundreds of hours per year. I think there's a second step when we think about what microgrids are, where you could actually provide power to the grid when you don't need it, type of thing. But that requires a whole lot of intersections, right? In order to do that, where price of the the source of the fuel and how all of that world works, that's more in the energy trader area. But I think the main thing is we've got to recognize as data centers that, look, at the moments of high risk grid instability, those are the times we probably want to be utilizing our local sources because it's a safer environment. We're not big believers at Compass or we're not believers of behind the meter at Compass. We think there's too big of a societal obligation there. We think, I've always believed to be great at something, you have to willfully suck at other things. I think we willfully suck at being a utility company. That's not what we want to be. I do think that there is a school of thought out there that to do that, but it almost always has the grid as a backup. I don't know how you slam 500 megawatts or a gigawatt onto the grid. It's the same issues that you have if you're using it as the primary. So we kind of view it as being in partnership with the grid, connect at those highest voltages, and then have them tell us when they need us to do some things. And that's, I really think, where a lot of problems get solved if that's the case. I mean, a lot of our issues are around peak time frames, and do we need to put another peaker plant online, or and if we can take away some of that and have normal planning, I think we can accommodate both. But we have to just plan on having our plants being utilized on a site.
One of the areas where I think you've, maybe not everybody wants to be in the utility industry, but at Compass, you've looked at maybe the boundaries of some of the relationships with suppliers and thought a lot about the supply chain. You've talked about reimagining the supply chain. What are you doing different at Compass, and how's that process going?
This is a great question. It's really fun. The concept of closely coupled supply chain is really doesn't do it enough justice. How ingrained our teams are together, we've been able to do some wonderful things with multiple suppliers and really go from all the way from the design through to the operations and the feedback loops, and we just continuously improve and kaizen on those relationships and innovate within those relationships. And we've had some very visible examples with both Schneider Electric as well as with Vertiv of being able to do some things where we work together. We are very much for providing that back to the industry. So whether it's predictive analytics, or it's a cooling unit that can do air or water, or it's a different way to do the service and support aspects of things. There's just a whole bunch of things that we think we do very collaboratively with our partners, and I think others can benefit from that too. Our industry, design and construction, is such a backwards mode in terms of its efficiencies, and we keep trying to move more and more things to the truck. What can we assemble on site versus what do we actually build on site? And that lends itself to all types of innovation that happens. The innovation around labor, innovation around how you solve for problems differently. I'd be a liar to tell you this is all new. This is the old Toyota way. This is, Toyota had a factory outside of Tokyo, and all the suppliers were right around it, and they had railroads going right into it. And, that model was, it took off, and people knew back in 1980 when you bought a Camry because it was, it was cheap and it had a bunch of features in it, right? That was better than the GM car or the Ford car at the moment. I mean, you didn't know for years later the quality of that. And, it took a long time for that quality to get recognized. And you've seen how those types of models, what Southwest Airlines did under Herb Kelleher's leadership, how they utilize fleet and consistency, and secondary airports and how they could get all their anchors to work together, or Walmart in the early days. There's just so many great business examples of having that discipline, and having partners like we do that are willing to ride with us along that discipline line has been game changing for Compass. We would not be there but for our partners. So it's been really awesome.
Yeah, and the whole process to sort of thinking about things differently, uh, it seems to have had benefits on the staff and executive side as well. You've built a pretty impressive team there at Compass, and I know this is a time when uh, finding the workers, the skilled workers, to be able to meet the amount of work that is scheduled to be happening in this industry is a challenge for everybody. Uh, with supply chain, you've thought a lot about process improvement and how you work with that and how you put a facility together. When it comes to putting a team together and building the team at Compass, how have you thought about that, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years, but it all boils down to culture. It's my, I always say I have three jobs. I have instilling the culture on the team, organizing it for success, and then working with the investors and the board. And of those three, instilling the culture is really my top favorite part of my job. I still do the initial culture training for everybody that comes into the company, and it's a I do the intro for it, but our culture has allowed us to have a highly diverse organization, people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. We bring in a lot of fresh blood, new blood that comes into the space that hasn't been in the space before. Um, Bringing new ideas, bringing new thought processes, new ways of doing things. I think our first core conviction at Compass is humility and pride out, and that starts with me. So just thinking of myself less and my view less, and getting more. And we are a group of learners, and we're a group of folks that are constantly trying to improve our business, make lives better there, but also ourselves. And that's really been a great litmus test for us. Is how much the more self-aware our leaders are, the more successful that we are as an organization in terms of hearing our customers, listening to our partners, listening to our employees, and trying to improve every day. It is a constant work in progress, is what I would tell you, Rich. But that culture has really been our key. It's been what we've hired and what we fired on, has been our culture. So it's been a journey, though. I mean, I've been on a long journey as a CEO, continue, trying to improve every day. And but yeah, we have a great team. I tell our board all the time, our business walks in and out the door every day, and we've got a great group of folks, and it's really fun to work with them every day.
And that's a particularly interesting approach, I think. On the one hand, data centers are a real estate business, but there's the whole technology side of the business as well. And in technology, I mean, you and I have been in the industry for a while. You see some wicked smart people coming in and out of like conference rooms where we're talking about this. It's wild. So, and that I think doesn't always align so neatly with the humility piece of that. So I think that's an interesting the way you've sort of differentiated there in terms of just like the numbers and getting things done. Is it getting much harder to hire to find the people you need?
Yes and no. If we as a company go for the cookie cutter type of model, I think it's very difficult. Like I think there's a lot that goes on. I think when we try to bring in people from different industry and different locations and bring them into the data center space, we've been very successful with doing that, and continue to add great talent that maybe takes most of the time for our teams, for them to really understand our culture, and get through the rubric of our culture. It usually takes about a year, and so all of our employees really kind of go through that first year of really learning our culture first, but then our industry as well. So it affords us the opportunity to maybe get some talent that wouldn't otherwise be able to come into our space. We're constantly working on job descriptions that don't say 10 years or more of data center experience, right? That's the same pool that everybody goes after.
Well, look, we're at a point where I think there's always been a lot of knowledge and experience and uh, really skills that have been in other industries that have done many pieces of what data centers have are working on. But we always sometimes think of data centers as being so special that folks outside, can't necessarily come in and just drop in and understand it. But I think it seems to me that's changed a lot in the past few years as the challenges before the industry have grown, and as there's been a lot of sort of minds being open to all the good talent and the good knowledge that's out there.
Well, and I think we've been successful with developing a program at Compass for a lot of entry level folks that just want to be in the space, and whether that be through the operations or through the construction lens. And that's how we've been successful with creating programs that just assume that people don't necessarily know what's going on. But I can get a construction manager that can be curious and can take pictures of what they think is interesting and write a diary down of what's gone on through the day. And we've been able to bring many young women into the space, or women into the space that just express interest, and they dominate the normal gender bias of a female being more observant than a male, of listening more than they talk, right? That's a normal gender delta. And why wouldn't we take advantage of these things? And we've watched some folks grow up in our space and then grow out. And I do think that we have to be a feeder in terms of where things are going. I think that there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more folks that are. You don't have to have experience necessarily. We just launched with a bunch of our partners and a new vocational element in southern Dallas with TSTC, which we're excited about. I think there just needs to be more ways that folks can come into the space. I think we've been working on the graduate program at SMU for some time for new leaders in our space, but I think going to the well of the same folks is so competitive. It's so difficult, and you see that merry-go-round go round, right? And we're really trying to do it maybe a little differently here.
Well, it sounds like it's going pretty well. I know that I think I'm starting to see more educational programs and college and graduate level programs coming up that seem to address that. And there seems to be a growing acknowledgement that the industry has to find ways to get young people aware of data centers, and starting to see that improve a bit by necessity, of course. You talked about the importance of culture. One of the things that it seems to me has been a part of Compass's approach to the market is thinking about sustainability and the importance of that in how we build and operate data centers. Um, Tell me about how that has evolved at Compass, and what the sustainability landscape looks like now.
It's interesting. Our sustainability is a byproduct. It's not a tick the box thing. So it's a byproduct of what we do. So in alignment with our purpose, making lives better by providing our customers a secure place to plug in wherever they grow. So the making lives better component, and then one of our core strategic anchors, besides fastest to ready and lowest total cost of ownership, is built to last. Built to last. And if you take just making lives better and built to last, you're going to get a lot of sustainable decisions. We throw that in with another principle around continuous improvement. We're trying to always look to do better. And so we're very incremental in the way we do sustainability. It's little steps here and there. Hey, why would we have concrete trucks on the road for so many miles versus going ahead and doing a concrete batch plant on our campus? And now we keep the trucks off the roads. It's better for the community. It's better for us. So a lot of our sustainability isn't that we're trying to, do some climate accord, we got to hit these boxes kind of thing. It's really a byproduct of the way we operate as a business, and that kaizen, that continuous improvement, that consistent elimination of waste. How could we be better? Wow, we're having, look at rebar. There's rebar in all of the forming and then doing rebar for slabs. Well, what if we could be different? What if, hey, let's go talk to the University of Texas and hear what they did with Texas Dot on how they did bridges, and we now use fiber and we don't have rebar. We've eliminated rebar as a trade. There's a ton of sustainability benefits for that, but it's a byproduct, if that makes sense. It's not that we don't, just like for diversity, like our strong culture is what lets us be a diverse company. It's a byproduct. It's not a goal. I hate tokenism, and I hate doing things for the purposes of, oh, look at me, I'm greenwashing on these things. You want it to be embedded in the DNA, and they become byproducts if you're doing it well.
I hear what you're saying about the greenwashing and the visibility. That said, there's one item that you mentioned before, which is HVO, where Compass visibly stepped up and said, "We're gonna do this because we're gonna lead, or there's an expense involved because we want people to follow." Um, Talk to me about HVO, how that's going, and how you think that whole initiative has advanced.
So I think it's advanced a good bit. I mean, I think a lot more providers and a lot of the users are starting to utilize it. I think there needs to be more. Like, the price has gone down on HBO. The more that it's in use, the more that it will. Um, it's that Jevons paradox. The price is going to go down, and more people should be using it, right? But if you think about it, just think about it from a community perspective. If you're in a community and all those generators start at the scale that we're doing things, and all that black soot's in the air, what are you doing for that community? Versus, and we're going to be there for a long time. Versus, hey, we can put a clean burning fuel in play. Like, it's clean, it's much cleaner, and that's such a no brainer. We did it for that reason. We did it for the thought process of having 700 generators go online at the same time. Well, you should do that differently. Like, you need to think about it, and it's worth it to do it. Now, there still needs to be more. There needs to be more usage in our industry, because then the pipelines will come, and the storage depots will come, and then when you're in an extended window, it'll come together. But I do think the regulatory environment needs to change that, because for somebody to pay more money and then not get the benefit of the reduction in emissions, it's going to take people that are out in more of a leadership role to do that. And I know Surreal and the Vantage team have done that as well, which is awesome. And, we hope that more groups will as well.
Let's talk a little bit about Compass and your trajectory. You're got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of pretty substantial campuses going on. I know you don't always necessarily talk a lot about what's under development, um, but I am interested, first of all, in the scale that you guys are seeing, and I'm interested in one project in particular. In Chicago, you have an interesting project with what used to be uh, an industry icon, the Sears headquarters out there, that you're converting into a data center campus. So maybe tell me a little bit about what you're doing with the Sears property, and maybe how that reflects the way you're thinking about where we're at now.
Yeah. So that was, it was Sears headquarters, in Huffington Estates. And, the team did a great job with working on finding the parcel. It's very hard to find parcels of that scale and size, right, within an environment like Chicago. We had great relationships with the city there, but one of the key things that we did was we looked at that building, and it's such a no brainer to do. It's like a duh, of course you should do it that way, but in the moment, it was like, look, let's see what can we recycle out of this thing? Like, what can we take? What can get done? And it's amazing. And to clear that site, hundreds of acres, and to clear a site with all those buildings and all those things, and have the vast majority be reusable. We put a concrete crushing plant to create our own aggregate. Off of the concrete that was poured, the glass could be reutilized. The wire in the building. There's so many pieces that were done. We were able to take all the furniture. It was kind of a sad, surreal thing, because there was people's desks and things that they hadn't been back to since COVID or whatever, and so like an eerie kind of feel. But it was great, and it's great to be able to do that, and versus just, does it take longer? Yes, it took longer. We could have demoed the site much faster if we didn't do it that way, but in conjunction with our work with ComEd and everything else, it worked out well. And it's really great to see. And it's great to see, we got to do let the fire department do drills, let the police department do drills, active shooters, and all, trap people. And so it's really neat to work that closely with the community, and then do well by that community. So we're really happy with that relationship. We had fire and police from all over, all the surrounding regions. They all got to practice different things on the site, which was really cool. Give back.
Yeah, a couple of questions just to follow up on that. One is that obviously you guys do quite a bit of greenfield. Um, But at the same time, we're seeing this phenomenon in some of the major markets where there's really not open land remaining in a lot of key places, or not much. You guys are pretty good at finding new markets and new spaces as they emerge. Are we going to see more of these sort of projects that are wind up needing to be retrofits simply because in these markets the highest value for any piece of land or business park is going to be for AI and data centers, or is that just too long a process? Having just done a large one, is there more scenarios like this that we're going to see?
No, I think so. I think there will be more scenarios, and I think there'll be some cobbling together of a few parcels, and then demoing on a few parcels, try to re-put them into one parcel, kind of a play. But I'll also say that there's equal work on the network side to extend the range, right, and extend where these facilities can go. So I think it's a combination. It's like most things in our business. It's not a this or a that. It's a this and a that.
Um, you mentioned a couple of times about working with the community, that these facilities are going to be in communities for a long time. We're at an interesting moment in the relationship of data centers and sort of public perception of them. And uh, I guess what do you see going forward in terms of having the industry maybe be perceived a little bit differently, or maybe a better way to ask it is, how do we sort of work with community questions and in some cases community resistance to data centers, and how do we change that? Because I like to say that everyone loves the internet, data centers maybe not so much, and yet they're inextricable. What's the path forward look like?
Well, I really think that community engagement, utility engagement, like what are you doing for from those perspectives is a super important part of things. And you know, unfortunately, in our space, it's not like other forms of real estate where it's Class A, Class B, and Class C. It's all the same class, but it's not. And so I think, I'd love for some of the Class C developers and to, I wouldn't mind if they went out by the wash every now and again, but that's not happening anytime soon. And so I think that you've got to look at what are you investing. What are you investing in that environment? We know uh, we want to invest in those communities. Try to do it in a place where it's not going to be it's in the planning of the community. Like that's what they want. They would prefer that to be. Um, how do you do things? What are you working on? Are you working on noise abatement? Are you working on the types of things that use an HVO versus diesel? Are you doing those things that are going to be better for that community? Are you creating jobs for that community? Are you there for the long run? And I think that's just like every other form of a big investment. I mean, if you're doing Hudson Yards in New York City, right, you have to do a lot of things in order to get that done. And I view this is what our obligations are, and it's kind of our covenant with the communities. You want to be a good neighbor, and that's really important. Our data center is the prettiest? No, of course not. I mean, it's a very utility oriented. Neither is a substation. It's not pretty to look at, right? But the scale of these things is impressive, and there's been a lot of missteps that our industry has. I mean, God knows I've made plenty over the 20 something years in the space, and I think you're constantly just trying to do better, and you're trying to do the right thing within the environment. But look, you're going to run up against people that just don't want progress. Like that's going to happen. There's that everywhere, right? There's always going to be a Malthusian side to the audience that we should go back to the dinosaur age or whatever. And so you're never gonna get those people won over. But what you do need to do is you do need to work on the folks that, man, I don't want to deal with this data center. I don't want to, there's too many trucks, or there's too much this, there's too much that. Like, what are you doing for those folks? I think that's what really we should focus on as an industry. And it's just like politics in the U.S. If you get the 10% from both sides out of the way, I think most people can have a pretty normal conversation about just about anything. And I view it the same way with data centers.
Uh, a last question is, what are you excited about, um, both in terms of Compass and the industry going forward? What gets you jazzed when you get out of bed in the morning?
You know, uh, I just can't. It's like you pinch yourself. Been through the boom of telecom was how I started my career, and then into this space, the boom of enterprise colocation, then the boom of cloud, and now the boom of AI, which dwarfs the other ones. And I feel very fortunate to be in the industry. I feel fortunate to have a great team, and I am so looking forward to this time frame of this mismatch between asset classes, where you've got very short term asset in the GPUs of the world, very long term assets in terms of what we do. And how do you build and adapt and develop to where that long term asset can be used by those short term assets over time? How's the world going to play out? How's AI going to impact? How's inference going to come into play? How's learning going to change over time? Is it always going to be that way, or is it going to be a little different? And to be in an industry that's that changing, with as much capital that's involved, I find it fascinating. I find it to be a really interesting problem to solve, and I think you're constantly trying to make sure you're not too set in your ways on your opinions of how things are going to go, and how do you build 100-year thing that can be adapted on a consistent basis. And it's a really fun thing right now. I mean, it's a very enjoyable to try to execute on that vision, try to execute on how you do scale better, bring others into the space. And I wake up every day kind of pinching myself. I'm so fortunate to be in the space, and so fortunate to time things right, of ability, passion, and opportunity, which are all needed for success. I think I definitely scored on the opportunity one by being in this space.
Yeah, it is wild, and I always appreciate the fact that there always is something new to learn every single day in this industry, and I know it keeps all of us busy. So I very much appreciate you making the time, Chris. I always enjoy our conversations, but I know in a fast-moving industry with a company that's going like Compass, you're always on your toes. So I appreciate you making the time to have this conversation and to share some of your insights with our audience.
Thank you so much, Rich. Great to see you.
Many thanks to Chris for joining us here on the podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to give it a like or a review. We've got lots more great content coming, so be sure to subscribe to our channel for more data center richness.